So it's no secret that PewDiePie has been involved in a lot of controversy over the last few years. And again, he finds himself in the limelight, this time under tragic circumstances. So for those of you who don't know, a white supremacist terrorist responsible for the shooting of a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, said subscribe to PewDiePie shortly before killing dozens of innocent people. Just to make it clear before I start analyzing things further, no, I do not think PewDiePie is responsible for the terrorist's actions. Obviously. No, I don't think he's a racist. At least probably not. But I do think he is a fucking moron that has said and done incredibly irresponsible shit, and he does not adequately take into account the kind of impact and influence he can have. He is a dumbass who too often says and does dumb shit. Other YouTubers and his fan base have defended him and coddled him enough. Most importantly, the guy cannot fucking learn. Let's quickly go through the major controversies and I'll give you my concise hot takes on each. So first, there was the infamous get poor Indian boys to hold up a sign saying death to all Jews. At the time, I didn't really think much of this. I thought it was pretty clearly a joke. At least in my mind, it was a joke that pointed out the absurdity of being able to pay people just $5 and get them to repeat hate speech mantras. Honestly, I think the most unethical part about this was that he was exploiting an extreme power imbalance here between these impoverished kids and being a millionaire, all for a silly gag. But whatever, in hindsight, I think it was probably a pretty shit joke, not well thought out. But the media did go pretty hard on him. However, if he had just stopped there, if he used that opportunity and experience to reflect on the fact that he is the biggest YouTuber in the world with a very young fan base, and that he would justifiably be under a hell of a lot of scrutiny from now on, and he genuinely tried to reflect and examine the kind of content he put out to the world, then everything would have been just fine, and I wouldn't be here talking about him.
What a fucking nigger. Jeez, oh my god, what the fuck? Sorry, but what the fuck?
Yeah, not really much to say here. He just fucking said it, hard R and all, on stream. I get that people can slip up, but it is kind of weird to me that that's the first word he grasped at. I guess whatever, this may have been a genuine oopsie doopsie, and he did apologize for it after. You'd think someone that got in a hell of a lot of trouble recently would think more about the kinds of things he says, but I'm willing to let this one go too. I'll just move on from it.
Ben Shapiro, do we have time for bonus meme?
So PewDiePie asked me to review some memes. Memes are this thing where people put funny stuff on my phone.
Ben Shapiro is the worst piece of subhuman trash on the internet. He's blatantly Islamophobic, and he often engages in inflammatory, hateful, bigoted rhetoric through a combination of charismatic, eloquent delivery and the disingenuous misrepresentation of statistics that he parades around as facts. He has a video with close to 4 million views where he claims that the majority of Muslims are radical.
680,030,000. 680,030,000 radical Muslims. We're above 800 million Muslims who are radicalized. More than half the Muslims on Earth. That's not a minority, that's now a majority. That's going to get a lot of civilized people killed. Scared yet? We're just getting started.
There's a good article on PolitiFact that points out why this is horseshit. This is just one example out of countless instances of him spouting similar bullshit. He often perpetuates the idea that Muslims pose a great violent threat to the well-being and safety of people in Western countries. In my eyes, people like him who create dangerous false narratives are responsible for these tragic acts, such as the one that occurred in Christchurch, just as much as ISIS recruiters who radicalize people through their propaganda. Oh, and for the kicker, the perpetrator behind the Quebec mosque shooting of 2017 was a massive fan of Ben Shapiro, and he was utterly convinced that the Muslims in his country posed a serious threat to him and his family.
Je suis comme sûr qu'ils vont venir comme tuer mes parents aussi, ma famille. Ma famille va être sauvée aussi.
Que ces personnes-là que tu as tuées, c'était des pères de famille.
Oui, ouais. Oui, j'y pense. C'est pour ça que j'ai honte comme ça aussi.
Dishonest, inflammatory, hateful rhetoric leads to radicalization. People like Ben spend years spewing this shit, distorting the narrative with cherry-picked, misrepresented stats, which of course leads to radicalization and eventually violent action, and Felix had him host a meme review. If you genuinely think that this had nothing to do with politics, or that there's nothing wrong with Pewds hosting Shapiro, it was all just for the memes, then I'm sorry, but you are a fucking dumbass. Ben Shapiro and his internet presence is inherently political. You think Ben gives a flying fuck about memes or about PewDiePie? He used PewDiePie, the most popular guy on YouTube, to get his face out there to millions and to freely advertise himself. He gave Shapiro a greater platform, a bigger voice, raised his profile, and essentially endorsed him to his fan base of 80 million, and never said a word against him or his beliefs. People like Ben should not have more followers and more potential to radicalize, and that's exactly what PewDiePie gave him. And then came the next big media shitstorm. PewDiePie, in a segment where he shouted out some smaller channels, gave a shout out to ER, a guy who does reviews and shit. Oh, and he's a Nazi too. And no, when I call him a Nazi, I'm not being a blue-haired SJW on a college campus that calls everyone who disagrees with me a Nazi. ER is unironically a legitimate Nazi because he constantly dog whistles about the Jewish question. And in some cases, it was more of a fucking horn than a whistle. This is not a guy making ironic, edgy jokes. This is a guy undergoing a concerted effort to spread Nazi propaganda and red pill people under the guise and plausible deniability of it all just being jokes and satire. In a now deleted post on his Gab account, he talks about his methodology. I'm not disappointed just in the fact that PewDiePie shouted out ER. Sure, it was negligent and incredibly irresponsible. You would think that he would do some background checks on the people he's shouting out, but whatever. What was far worse than PewDiePie just shouting him out was his response to the situation. He doubled down. He shrugged it off as an oopsie and then played the fucking victim. Not once did he apologize for being a negligent dumb fuck. No, he played the card that he always plays. He whined about the mainstream media. And he proceeded to shout out ER a couple more times too. Some real big-brained guy here. How about you take some fucking responsibility for your stupid actions? You have 80 million subs, you have a massive platform to voice your opinions, to influence an unfathomable number of people. You are a genuinely powerful person in the modern landscape, and you spend a ridiculous amount of that time playing the fucking victim. That's just fucking sad. PewDiePie has been pandering to right-wing ideologies for some time now. This is no longer an oopsie or two, it's now a clear trend, and it supplements similar, more extreme trends and ideas that are popular on the YouTube platform. The problem isn't that PewDiePie might be racist. I don't think he is. The problem is that other racists think that he might be racist, and they pander right back to him. They have enough reason to believe that he might be one of them. And so long as it's left unclear, they can use him and his fan base to push their ideologies across. This may seem far-fetched, but you look at the evidence and it starts getting pretty damning. These guys just want to use PewDiePie to spread their shitty messages. And I'm not pulling a guilt by association meme here. I'm not saying that PewDiePie is racist or that he's a Nazi or a white supremacist. But he did promote people like Ben Shapiro and ER, who themselves directly push far-right ideologies. Not to mention the fact that he follows Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern on Twitter, two people who are literal white nationalists.
Hey everyone, okay, so today we're going to be talking about a very serious subject. The thing I want to talk about today is the Great Replacement.
I go to Poland, what is it, 99% white? I don't need any security, the streets are incredibly clean, crime is almost non-existent, nobody gets called a racist, no endless diversity nagging. You know, I've spoken against white nationalism, but I'm an empiricist. I'm an empiricist. I've spoken out against white nationalism, but I'm an empiricist. I'm listening.
I have no idea why he would be following them, but other political actors on the right seem to have noticed, and PewDiePie is the perfect useful idiot for them to manipulate.
Everyone must subscribe to PewDiePie in his war against the tyrannical T-Series right now.
Oh, hey Jordan, what are you doing right now?
I'm subscribing to PewDiePie.
He has even been reached out to by UKIP. I mean, what the fuck? There's enough evidence here for people on the far right to believe that PewDiePie aligns with their views. There's a reason why these people keep reaching out to him and pandering to his fan base. And he is somewhat complicit in the normalization of far-right rhetoric and ideologies. A few years ago, some popular YouTubers had some fairly innocent ideas of being anti-PC, spearheaded by people like Filthy Frank, who I was legitimately a pretty big fan of. However, now YouTube, and especially gamers on YouTube, have a pretty clear pipeline of guiding viewers towards far-right, dangerous ideologies. 3 Arrows has a great video about this called How to Fall Down the Anti-SJW Rabbit Hole. And if you're a gaming YouTuber who made his fame and built up a fan base of tweens by overreacting to horror games, you probably aren't clever enough to handle edgy content responsibly. Again, this is not just mere guilt by association. This is PewDiePie curating a portion of his audience a certain way. Regardless of it being unintentional or inadvertent, he is somewhat complicit in that. For better or worse, the far right sees PewDiePie as one of their own. Alarm bells have to be going off when the poll board on 4chan start praising you as red-pilled and based. Or when your subreddit has a pretty racist post like this reach 8,000 upvotes. It kind of points to where a portion of your fanbase is headed, dog. I mean, every fanbase is bound to have a few nut jobs, right? But if a nice chunk of your viewers start doing stuff like this, you should probably take a step back and start to examine the kinds of things you say and preach and the kinds of people you platform. It's just weird to me that for a channel that's often claimed to be apolitical, where things are done just for the memes or for the laughs, seems to get a lot of praise from political personalities of a very specific kind of persuasion. PewDiePie could have had a different influence on a portion of his fanbase by not having people like Shapiro or shouting out people like ER or saying the N-word on stream. Just to make it clear for the dipshits out there, I'm not saying that if you have ever said subscribe to PewDiePie, you're immediately a racist. What I'm saying is, extreme right-wing personalities on the internet have tried to co-opt that phrase, and they want to sink their claws into his impressionable viewers. And there's pretty good reason for it. When you look at his track record, and the fact that he refuses to learn, and that he always doubles down by playing the victim and attacking the mainstream media, it's no wonder that a minority but still a significant enough chunk of your fanbase starts heading a certain direction. There is a reason why the terrorist said subscribe to PewDiePie. He just regurgitated every far right-wing meme out there. And even though that phrase is pretty widely spread throughout the internet and has been repeated by people of all kinds of persuasions and views, people on the far right have tried particularly hard to try and own it. And that is something PewDiePie could have certainly avoided. The fact that the terrorist said those words may feel sickening to PewDiePie right now. However, this is the absolute best opportunity for him to take a step back and evaluate some of his actions and what sort of people he has endorsed and has allowed to take advantage of his position as an influencer. If he can't grow as a person after this, and he goes back into that pattern of pretending as though he's the victim in every circumstance and lashing out at the mainstream media, then I think he's forever lost. There's often this assertion made that apparently the media regularly calls PewDiePie a Nazi, but I don't really see this happening. If people could find me examples of this, that would be cool. I think generally what the accusation is that PewDiePie normalizes far-right rhetoric and platforms certain fucked ideologies, which could lead to some of his viewers getting radicalized. At this point, I think that's a pretty fucking fair statement to make. So before attacking Vox or The Verge, could you at least not strawman their positions? About a month ago, a video called The Double Standard of Felix started to get a lot of traction, and it encapsulated a lot of the common views that people on YouTube seem to have about PewDiePie. In this video, J-Law proposes that Felix has been unfairly maligned, that he's actually a really nice guy that donates to charity, that he's a humble person, and none of this gets the recognition it deserves. And maybe that is true. Maybe he is a great guy, and a lot of his good deeds go too far under the radar. And maybe during that very first controversy, the media coverage and the backlash towards him was a little harsh. PewDiePie felt attacked, understandably so. But it doesn't matter that he is actually a good person or that he does good things. That should not excuse him from the string of fuck-ups he has had. He could have learned from that first experience, understood that he is the biggest YouTuber in the world, and with that comes great scrutiny, but also a great influence. He had two options at that point. Option 1, he could try and navigate controversial topics and people in a more clever, more nuanced way where he actually does his due diligence and research, or just avoid them. Be a little self-aware that the ideas and people you platform can have real effects in shaping your fanbase, and that you're probably not well equipped or clever enough to deal with controversial issues or people. And then there's the second option, the nuclear option. Curl up in your echo chamber of fans and yes men and say fuck all the outsiders, fuck the media, they're all against me. I'm gonna do what I want, say what I want, and platform who I want. I am, after all, the victim in all of this. At every stage, at every controversial issue, he had these two options and he always picked the second one. If after the first incident he had picked the first and genuinely stuck to it, there's no way that the terrorists would have mentioned PewDiePie by name. Well, Felix, there's an outpouring of support for you out there yet again. The vast majority of people online are still by your side. Somehow, you still have those two options available. Don't fuck it up. Just a couple quick things that I realized after I finished making the video. So it seems like PewDiePie cleared his following list, like he doesn't seem to follow anyone anymore on Twitter, except for one person, and he used to be like in the hundreds, and he didn't say a single thing about why he's done this, so it kind of makes me wonder. What I imagine happened is that a bunch of people started calling him out and asking why he was following those white nationalists and retarded people, and instead of having to deal with that hassle or explain himself, he just unfollowed everyone, which is an interesting but cowardly choice to make. And that really makes me wonder just how much he lines up with people like Molyneux and his beliefs.